And welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Third hour on Friday. It's time for What Just Happened. Three great returning champions, one world champion, but we'll get into that in a second. Carole Montgomery is back, comedian, creator, and one of the stars of the Showtime series, Funny Women of a Certain Age. And there's various iterations of it now. It's great stuff. Carole, welcome back.
I'm glad to be here. I always love coming on here.
It's good to see you. You can see her, but behind her is like the Aurora Borealis. There's little happening behind. It's kind of cool. Also back, Nida Khan's here. Journalist, producer. She's written everything, Huffington Post, New York Daily News, The Griot, and more. It's good to see you, Nida. It's been a while.
It has been a long time, Dean. Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be back. I don't know if Matt, your esteemed producer, told you I had an injury, so I wasn't able to walk for months. It was horrible. I'm still on a cane. I feel like a 90-year-old woman, but I'm glad. This is actually the first interview I'm doing in like 7 months or 8 months. It's been a horrible ordeal.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry for you. I'm glad things are getting better, but I think the next guest will be able to top that. Judah Friedlander is here, known as the world champion at specials on Netflix, other places, on TV series, movies, and I think you can still see his streaming live show every Saturday night, 9 p.m. Eastern time. Is that true?
Yeah, probably not this Saturday, but definitely next Saturday. Just about every
What's up with this Saturday?
I do a 2-hour live stream stand-up show.
What's wrong with this Saturday, Judah? What happened?
There's a karate tournament. I have to be ready for it.
I'm
just trying to save the world. As the world champion, I'm a champion. That means I'm a champion of the world, and all the rights that the world has, and all the creatures on the world, all the plants on the world, all the air that goes in and around the world. I fight for their rights. So it's a busy night tomorrow.
You're not getting away from karate champion. You have to explain this. Are you actually fighting someone, or is it like a Karate Kid expo, comic book expo or something? Is it real? What goes on here?
Dean, if that was an adult question, I would answer it. And
you don't really, do you really do?
I didn't know this. The high road here.
I'm not mocking you. I'm sincerely curious about your life. I've known you for a long time.
Dean, I'm here to talk about serious issues. I don't know about you.
Okay. Carole, let's talk about Judah's karate for a few seconds. I have some pivot. No. So Alex Murdoch.
I'm actually going as his guest. I don't know why he didn't invite you.
Oh, really? I would go in a second. I don't know if you guys watch Karate Kid. The thing is, I've learned I don't like children, so I really like the karate. I don't like the kids part. Same thing with Stranger Kids. Like the stranger stuff, like sci-fi, not a big fan of kids. I like when the monster eats the kids.
You don't like kids, period?
I don't have any. I think there's a reason why. I'm really, not to get into that. Not to make this about me, but it is my show. So let's talk about Alex Murdoch. Carole, did you watch any of the stuff leading up, reading nothing?
You know what? I literally, I got all my information from social media and about he's an idiot. Did
you have an opinion before the verdict came down if he was guilty?
I knew he was guilty. Oh, come on.
Really? So you didn't even need to watch it?
No, I mean, come on. And then, that he was crying on the stand. It's like, you know what? You murdered 2 people, man. Have the balls and just be a man and not cry like a pussy is my personal
Interesting.
opinion.
Judah, what did you think? Did you watch it as the world champ?
Let me tell you something, Dean. I've seen enough Lifetime TV movies to know that he was guilty.
Really? That's what did it?
I didn't even have to watch the trial. I saw his face.
Yep.
I've seen the Lifetime movies. I know the story.
Bad Man. You knew it right away. Bad Man is Stranger Things. Nida, you're a journalist. Tell me anything more detailed. Did you read anything?
As a journalist, I was trying to figure out why there was so much coverage of this, such extensive coverage. Like, okay, fine, we have to cover it a little bit. But to me, it felt like they were trying to turn it into the OJ trial or something.
Yep.
There was I tweeted a picture of CNN. It look like a mock, I don't even know what they were doing, like a mock trial or something. And they had the host in the middle and then 2 podiums where people were sitting on the side. And I'm like, what is going on here? What is happening? And the 24/7 nonstop in the courtroom. It's too much. It was too much. And I agree, he was guilty. We all knew it. So no surprises there.
What's remarkable is that the jury went in and came back. The jury must have been like, time for deliberation. So who thinks he's guilty? Everyone. Okay, let's get a free sandwich. Let's wait like another hour and then we go. Because that doesn't, in a double murder, it's usually not, usually the jury goes in the room and does like an informal poll and everyone must just be like guilty, 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 guilty. It's like, I guess we're done here, everyone. You want to see any evidence? No. So that's the end. But what was different about OJ, Netflix had a 3-part miniseries in the middle of the trial. Like OJ, it took years later to have series and books. This guy had a Netflix. Why are we obsessed with true crime? Let me ask you, Carole, maybe you're not, but do you like true crime stuff? Because I have to admit that I do get caught up in it.
Really?
Like the miniseries. Like I watched the whole Spectre miniseries, even though I knew Phil Spector had done it, but I couldn't remember what happened. So I'm watching and I'm like, I don't know, maybe he was guilty, maybe he wasn't. I don't Google it to find out the ending if I can't remember. There's a whole thing of the Phil Spector miniseries on Showtime. And then there was other ones. I watched the whole thing. I'm like, I tried to make up my own mind up.
No, but I first of all, going back to OJ, I lived during that. I mean, I remember sitting, this is terrible. One of my son's first words was OJ.
Wow.
Because it was on the TV 24/7. I mean, see, that's not a joke. That's actually true. He, we always had it running in the background. So I don't want to see it rehashed. I was there. So do you know what I mean? Like, we lived in LA during that time. And I remember having the TV on and the whole chase, the whole Bronco chase. I don't like it.
Did your son's first phrase was, if the glove doesn't fit, you have to quit? Like, was there other OJ references?
No, his first phrase was, Mom, he's fucking guilty.
Right, by the way, Katie Tur from NBC, I don't know if you guys know MSNBC anchor Katie Tur. Her parents were the ones that recorded from the helicopter the Bronco chase. It was in her book. I interviewed her last year about her book. She comes from this helicopter journalism family. Literally, they invented helicopter journalism before anyone else did, her parents, and did really well. And then financially took a big downturn later when everyone else got a helicopter. So
I have to just say, I have to tell you this one story. It's kind of a sideways story about like
what the show's about.
Okay. So the Menendez brothers, you remember those boys?
Sure.
Such good boys. They loved their parents so much.
Right.
Before they killed their parents, my husband used to work at A&M Studios in LA. Okay. And so the Edge, the guitarist from U2, was renting their house. This is years before this happened.
Sure.
And Todd, I don't remember if I was there, but he was having a party. I must have gone there. We all went there because they were having a party. We were hanging out with U2. And years later, we find out that's the house where they killed their parents. But it was years later that they did it. But that's like a bizarre.
Did you have a weird feeling when you were in the house that someone's going to die here one day, or no? It wasn't like that.
No.
Like
I just
Shining
walked around
thing.
the house, like thinking to myself, these people have way too much money.
Judah, you're a world champion. Have you had any run-ins with serial killers? Maybe Dahmer, Son of Sam? Anybody? Any connection?
I hope not.
Have you ever been to a house party?
Going back to what you were saying earlier, I agree that it's like the nonstop coverage of this. It's kind of like the Missing White Woman, series that they do, where it's like, okay, this is a terrible story, what happened here, but it affects such a small amount of people. And when you look at the national and global issues that are ignored for that airtime, it's like a disgrace, so I think it's, so for that reason, that's like the main reason I don't watch that stuff.
MS was like nonstop, everything. I was like, what's going on? Because my lunchtime,
there's so much, there's a pandemic still going on. There's climate crisis. I mean, there's so many things. Wars,
championship, they should be covering that. I mean, this is ridiculous. I'm with you 100%. Nitha, do you get into any of the true crime podcasts or series?
Nope. And it's funny you bring that up, because last weekend, I visited my mother and found out that she is obsessed with watching all of those crime series. I mean, it was nonstop. And I was like, what are you doing? And then, of course, she always thinks that something's going on, that stuff is so bad. And this is why she's always paranoid about, like, my niece is going out and, saying to my sister, be careful, stuff is bad. You don't want anything to happen to them. And I was like, you really need to stop watching all of these true crime series and things going on in reality, whatever you want to call it. It's kind of crazy. I don't understand the obsession.
It's not an obsession, but I think the fact that I used to be a lawyer and tried cases and stuff plays a role in it, because I watch it in a way where it's interesting. I'm like, oh, how's this lawyer doing? And how's that? It's an odd thing. All right, let's continue. Another big topic, talking about crimes. Tennessee just made it a crime to do drag shows in public. And the law says any place children could be. And spoiler, children could be anywhere. I could have a child in here. You never know. They're kids. They're small. They hide in places. But in Tennessee, the governor there signed it into law yesterday. And the GOP state senator, Jack Johnson, who promoted the bill, said it's not anti-drag, it's pro-child. So it literally makes it a crime if drag shows happen in public places or while children are present. On paper, if it's a private place and it's 18 above, they can do it, but no drag show, library, school readings like they were. That's the big thing. They want to ban that because somehow seeing someone dressed like Cher is going to do something to these children in a really alarming way. Judah, what about you? I mean, do you want to protect children?
I think it sets a bad precedent for free speech, period. Because you're censoring people and you're saying once you say one thing you're not allowed to do, then you can use that same justification for anything. So I think that those laws are dangerous.
They are. And it's also on some level egging up hate and dislike of not just drag,
right.
but
the bigotry is always there.
Right.
The oppression's always there. And that's the main thing they're doing these days. So it's scary. Yeah.
It's ironic that of course the guy now there was a picture that just
Governor Lee. Yeah.
And it's like, it's always these men. It's always these men. Sorry, boys. It's always these men that are like, we have to regulate women's rights. We have to tell men, men drag. It's like, and then if you pull back the curtain, they're the ones in drag having abortions with their mistresses. It's like, do we not see the hypocrisy in this shit?
We do, but it's remarkable. It plays well for their base. Nitha, I mean,
what about the base? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm so tired of hearing about this base because I think people, Judah and I travel. I don't know if you're still traveling, but we've traveled all over the country, and this base that they're talking about is this much. It's literally this much. Most people are right down the middle. Most people are pro women's rights. Most people are like, what you do in your bed, if you want to dress up like a woman or a man, go ahead, as long as you don't bother me. And it's just so interesting that people use that thing about, well, we're trying to appeal to our base. And I think that's crap. I think most people are very pro all of this stuff.
I think you're right, because we basically have minority rule. We have, elite minority rule. There's this illusion that we have this, majority rule, and we don't, and I don't know if it's human nature, but, throughout the existence of humanity, how often has there actually been the majority of the voice of the public that rules, how many times I've been on a subway and there'll be one person on there who might be just yelling really loud religious stuff, trying to proselytize, and I would say 99% of the people on that subway car do not want to hear this person. Does one person speak up about it and say, hey, can you shut up or keep it to yourself? Nope. Everyone just tries to ignore it. So that's actually a minority rule there. That person yelling and screaming has the power because nobody else is doing anything. And with government, it's almost always minority oppression of the majority, always.
So what also happen, like they always need a boogeyman, right? So fear is all they have, and whether it's Muslims, Jews, immigrants, trans folks, whoever, that's what it is. It's fear of the other. And the dynamic that comes into play, right? There's real suffering out there. People can't afford housing, livable wage, and then you have more and more billionaires, millionaires, tax cuts for the rich. So there's a huge disparity. So there's all this like fear, uneasiness, and then they capitalize on that and make it seem like, oh, this is happening because of this group. And then those groups change and they use them every time they want for whatever they're trying to push. And you could see that even with East Palestine. So that train derailment and what happened there, those were things that Donald Trump, when he was in office, right? Things that he took away regulations. But then what does he do? As soon as that happens, he goes there and tries to capitalize on their suffering and act like I'm the man of the people. I'm here for you. I'm standing with you. And unfortunately, people fall victim to that. And then they have, of course, obviously there are people who have their own ingrained biases and racism, and that comes out too. So all of that gets lumped in together, and then they take that and run with it and effectively create the minority rule that you were talking about.
Well, also the minority rule is set up by some of our mechanisms of government. Gerrymandering allows minority rule. The U.S. Senate is set up to be minority rule from day one, where every state, California has 40 million people. They get 2 senators. North Dakota has 800,000 people. They get 2 U.S. senators. I mean, it's inherently minority rule there. Gerrymandering is one of the worst things. I mean, if we had more competitive House races, you would get rid of the extremists on the right. You know, the extremists on the left, we want healthcare for all. Like, it's not, we don't want to break America into parts like Marjorie Taylor Greene. But I will, one quick thing though, about these Republicans saying they want to protect the children. The number one killer of children 18 and under is gun violence. There's no disputing it. It's CDC's give us the data. It's guns, either they're murdered, suicide, or unintentional discharge of a gun, and they're killed. That's how you save lives. 8 to 10 children every day are killed. None are killed by drag shows. No joking. None are killed by drag shows. They won't do the thing to actually save a child's life. They don't care. At the same time, in Tennessee, they banned gender affirming therapy for children, which is done with the parents' approval and the parents' support. And they know that's going to lead to more suicide attempts because data shows that, you know, transgender teens have almost a 50% attempted suicide rate we're talking about, but that goes down when they get the treatment they want. So if they were about kids, there's ways of saving kids' lives. They're not. They're about making their adult base, whatever sliver of it is happy about it, because they go to meetings and the 50 people who show up are the ones who don't like drag queens. And they go, oh, you see, no one likes drag queens. We have to ban this.
Yeah, but you know, Carlin had that great bit about you know, that the right cares about kids until they're 18, and then they ship them off to war.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's like you think about like because my son's 31 now, okay, and you know, obviously he grew, you know, and I look at him as a child, you know, I look at him as an adult, and he's the same person, but he's now a grown up. But you know what I mean? But nobody cares about a 31-year-old white guy. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's like this whole thing about the child, every one of us is a child. Why aren't you giving this shit about us? And, you know, you know, before the show started, I just got accepted to Medicaid. I'm so terrified, Medicare. I'm so terrified that Congress is going to pull it just when I was able to do it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, they don't care about children. That's just, like you said, that's just the 75 people that go, we're doing this for the kids, and when they grow up, we don't give a shit.
Well, they all copy each other, because what's going on in Tennessee, the law, it's now it's making its way through other GOP state legislatures. It's this cookie cutter conservatism, but it's not even conservatism anymore. It's just cookie cutter bigotry. And they're like, well, if we talk about drag queens here, we're going to pass law. Well, we got it. Oh my God, Alabama did it. Tennessee, what are you doing? You got to pass the same thing. Literally, you're seeing that play out across the country. And look at the GOP. They tell us they're about freedom. They are banning books. They are banning Black history, banning abortion, banning the medication to have abortion if the judge in Texas rules what they want, banning rights for transgender teens, banning saying gay in school, banning academic freedom, banning freedom of thought. But their twisted version of freedom is that, where freedom doesn't exist. Judah, help us. Well, does this make sense?
No, I think it's, I mean, unfortunately, yeah, what they're doing is awful, but it makes sense, you know. It's the stuff that always goes on, you know. So it just has to be fought against, you know. And you know, there's certainly a lot of you know, comics out there who tout themselves as free speech, but I haven't heard them criticize those angles that much, you know.
So. No, but there are comics who will make fun of transgender people and then take the mantle of being so edgy. I'm like, it's the easiest thing of all to mock people who are vulnerable. I couldn't think of an easier joke to do. Like, and you can do an objectively funny joke. I'm not saying you can't, but I'm saying it doesn't make you edgy or amazing or wow, you're saying things no one will. It's the easiest jokes. We can all make fun of.
Right. No, but I'm saying it's like, you know, they'll criticize, you know, the so-called woke for saying, oh, you shouldn't say this, you shouldn't say that, but they won't criticize when actual government officials are taking away freedom of speech.
No, I agree.
That's my point. That's an actual point.
Yeah. What happened to government tyranny then, right? Like, that's
exactly.
For having Second Amendment rights and whatnot, but all of that goes out the window. It's the usual hypocrisy that you see on the right. And, you know, because a lot of it is, it's about having a dumbed down society because it's easier to control than a well-informed, right?
You know who started that? Reagan.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what you've seen throughout history, right? Is like the burning of books, taking away books, silencing writers, educators, philosophers, thinkers. You always see, and then imprisoning them. And this is what, and I've been saying this, Dean, I know on your show forever, but I really do worry about somebody like Trump or somebody like him getting in office again, because his first term was just a trial run to see what he could get away with. And just imagine he or DeSantis or somebody else, if they're in the highest office in the land, what will happen to journalists, to freedom of speech, freedom of expression, all of our civil liberties, civil rights. I mean, we're seeing everything being demolished across the board. Voting rights, they're attacking affirmative action, women's rights, you name it. Everything is under attack, and it's happening simultaneously from all ends of the spectrum. You see it on the legal standpoint, you see it in people running for office, you see it in classrooms, in schools, with parents, everywhere. You see it all over the place.
You do. Carole, why do you think we are seeing this concerted effort around the nation? Do you think it's the sense of the right just feel like they're losing control, or it's demographic change, or because there is something going on? It feels like a much more concerted attack from all different ways, that as opposed to just being one issue that they're talking about.
I think they got what's the word, emboldened when Voldemort was president, and they want to keep doing it. I really do. I think that first of all, it was like, when he was elected, it was like, the scene from The Wizard of Oz where the Munchkins come out. All the racists went, "We can come out now?
Yep.
What? We can come out?" And, and all this stuff. So, what you were saying about, I mean, everyone is saying is absolutely spot on. But I will say this, the only thing that really kind of gives me hope, and it's very slightly, is that the younger people, you have to understand, I'm 65 years old. I remember when Roe v. Wade was passed. So, I always say this to younger women: this isn't my fight. I'll be there with you. This isn't my fight. And the younger women, the women in their 20s, they're like, what the fuck just happened? So at least, I mean, we should have taken over the House, but because of gerrymandering, that didn't happen. But the fact is, the Senate, we did take over the Senate because a lot of young people came out and went, oh shit, now we're talking. So really 2024 is going to be fascinating to me, because I really don't know what's going to happen.
No one does. Judah, what do you think? What do you think is causing this kind of, it really almost is a hysterical nature of the right? And I say that as in a mocking way, but I say that sincerely, that we're living in 2023. And there were times Republicans would say things as red meat. They'd say this and that is red meat. We're going to overturn Roe v. Wade and this and that. Now they're doing it. They did it. Now they're passing laws. It's no longer those books shouldn't be in school. Like, we're going to pass a law to ban those books now. That's what Ron DeSantis did. We're going to ban anything we don't like. We're just going to use the government to ban it. And that's not something I've seen before.
Well, I wish the opposition party would take that same attitude in a different way. To me, the Democrat Party doesn't, I think both parties are still basically writing laws that favor corporations and not people. And when you have the opposition party not fighting as ruthlessly as the other party that's worse, it's a big problem. So I don't know the answer there. Yeah.
This whole when Biden was running, when Hillary was running, right? And they go low, we go high. Fuck that, man. You're bringing like a knife to a gunfight.
That's exactly what I agree 1,000%.
I mean, like, Jesus.
Yeah,
right?
But when Michelle Obama said that, though, it was a different time in America. Like, there was racism and bigotry, but it's still like, getting back to the emboldening. Earlier on this week on my show, we covered this concept in mass communication called the spiral of silence. And the spiral of silence is the idea that if you think your views are out of the norm and not the dominant view, you'll be quiet. It builds a spiral. And then the dominant view gets even louder and louder. So you feel like, I can't say that. Look at everyone's against me. Trump reversed the spiral of silence around bigotry, where he broke through it and like, I can be the bigot. I am. So with Obama, there was some bigotry and stuff, but with Trump, it just took it to new levels. And I think that they're emboldened now to do anything. That's what, like, whatever they dream. It's like Peter Pan, hold my hand, Wendy, we're going to fly. Oh, we're going to ban books and ban drag shows and anything we want. We're going to ban Look at Ron DeSantis. He's going to ban diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in the school and funding. That's been around for decades. That's not some new woke thing. That's been since like the 90s. We're going back. They want to go backwards.
Well,
They want to go backwards.
I think
they
one of the
emboldened. They were emboldened absolutely with Trump, but I don't think they were easy at all on Obama. Like I think that actually they couldn't stand the fact that there was a black president, right? And that's what really ignited a lot of this. And you got to remember, we're looking at it, you know, a lot of times on a mainstream level, but in their silos, in their echo chamber, this stuff has been spoon fed to them, you know, for years and years. Whereas a lot of people are talking about Fox News now. We're talking about 20 plus years or however long Fox has been around, that is what they did day in and day out. So all it took was somebody like Trump just igniting that match to bring everybody together, to embolden them. But this stuff has been festering for a long time, and there are all kinds of laws that went around the country diminishing rights for years too. Then you had think about all the attacks against Muslims, right? And all the Islamophobia and the madness that went on for years and years and years. So it has been open, but yes, Trump took it to another level.
And Judy, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what it was. I don't remember.
I was looking forward to it.
It's all right. What were you saying?
The difference is, I was saying maybe we're disagreeing, but my point was, the bigotry and the racism against Obama were things I had never seen. But what they're doing now is no longer just talking about things; they're turning it into government policy. That's what I haven't seen before. So you could have said Michelle Obama saying they go low, we go high, yeah, because it was racism and names. Like we're not going to we're better than that, right? This is banning books by law, and teachers is a third-degree felony in Florida if you bring a book to school that's not on the DeSantis approved book list by their censors. That's what's different. Drag show now, you go to jail if you do one. It's not just talking about it. To me, this is something the GOP used to be about smaller government. They've given it up. It's about oppressive government.
Right. No, there needs to be much bigger movements against all these things. I mean, it's a real crisis, and I think the other problem is that, you know, the Democratic. There's, as far as like a legitimate real left-wing media, you know, to the left of the Democrats, there isn't one. I mean, even if you look at MSNBC, you know, the furthest left they'll go is having on AOC once in a while, having on Bernie once in a while, anyone from that kind of train of thought. But, you know, if you look at MSNBC, it's largely Democrats and former Republicans who don't like Trump. You're not really hearing much from the left. And I think the Republican Party, generally, they set the narrative for what things are done on the media and on the government. And the Democrats are always reactive to them. They're never taking action. It's always reactive to them. Like the Republicans will say Democrats are soft on crime. And now the Democrats will be like, all right, we're going to show you how much we love cops and how tough we are on crime, to try to win over disgruntled Republican voters. They never, you know, I think it's a Republican myth that the Democratic Party is constantly leaning left. I think the Democrat Party tends to run leaning right, not leaning left. And so you have both parties that are actually in many ways swinging more to the right, and that's dangerous. And I think there's a lot of people who the Republicans are playing well to the fear, you know, to that kind of stuff. But the Democrats, I think there's a lot of people they're not playing to at all. There's a lot of young people, progressive people, who have lost faith in them. They hate the Republicans, but they've lost faith in the Democratic Party. So I think the Republicans likely could have, you know, bigger turnout, you know, because the Republicans, they tend to vote for people they actually really like, and there's a hell of a lot of people who vote Democratic, but they're just doing that because they know they're not as bad as the other party, but not because they really like them. Got a government that's actually for the people, and you know, like I said, I think one party's a lot worse than the other, but neither party's really. I mean, even Pete Buttigieg, are they proposing? I mean, you know, with the East Palestine train wreck, did he actually say, you know, we're going to do laws and regulate this? Or, you know, he's like, hey guys, you got to do a better job with your safety. It's like, no, regulate it. Don't let the train lobby run the laws. Make the laws for the people, you know.
I agree with you. And go ahead, Nida.
Oh, I was gonna say I agree 1000% with everything you said, Judah. And it's, it's funny because I was thinking about this the other day. I wrote a piece like, I don't even know when this was, 2010 or something, about the frightening power of right-wing media. And that's what it was. It was about the fact that Democrats are so reactionary and responsive to every single quote unquote right-wing outrage. So even, we're talking about Obama when he was president, you had the whole Shirley Sherrod video that happened, right? So before they even knew what really happened in that situation, they forced her out. Then you had the whole Jeremiah Wright thing. And it was every single thing, like he had to distance himself from Jeremiah Wright because there was all this right-wing outrage. So it's always that reactionary response instead of being proactive. Like you were saying, Judah, that is where the Dems fail. We always talk about Dean. They fail in their messaging. And you hate to look at something like East Palestine from like a messaging standpoint because there's such suffering going on and people that have been traumatically impacted. But unfortunately in politics, you do have to grasp what's happening, find solutions, and get a hold of the narrative as well. And that is where they failed again. And they're letting the right wing take that over instead of doing something. Now Biden is saying he's gonna go there, I don't know, next week or something. Why are you going weeks later? You should have been there right away. I'm like, come on, what is happening here?
That's
right. It's like I just want to say I agree exactly. It's like if you want to win elections, like that was a town that voted Trump. Something horrible happened. The Trump administration made things with trains less safer.
Yep.
Just on a political strategy point, why don't you go there and you can win votes there? It's like, what are you doing? Do you want to win? Like, what are you doing?
I agree. Carol, you want to say a quick thing before we go to a break?
I was just, what Judah was saying about the younger people, because like I always, my son's a great leader for me because, I've watched him grow up and, he voted for Biden, but he's progressive and he's, he basically voted for Biden because he didn't want Trump. So that, like what you were saying, it's not like none of us, I think, really liked Biden, but we were like, we can't have him. We can't have that asshole in here for another 4 years. But he's very disillusioned, and he and we have major discussions in politics and about politics, and he's actually more progressive even than me and my husband. But he's so disillusioned. He said, "Why should I vote?" And I was like, "Lane, please, you have to vote. You have to, and you have to tell your friends to vote. I know it seems like it's worthless." But so he does because we've really ingrained that in him. But I'm telling you, Judah's absolutely right. The way you're going to win back America is go to the young people, because the young people don't give a shit what color you are. They don't care what gender you are. They don't care. They just want to live, and they want to have food and healthcare and housing, and they want to marry who they love. That's what you. I can't believe that Biden did not show up at that train station.
That's interesting that you guys say that because we didn't talk about that on the show, but I think that's really interesting. And I think from politics, it would have been an easy thing to go for 2 hours. It's a quick flight from DC. Go there, a lot of press, show people in that area. So let's take a quick break.
He took a train in Ukraine for 10 hours. He could have taken a fucking plane.
I know, he loves trains. He could have went there and talked about the trains. All right, let's take a quick break. We're going to come back with Carole, Nida, and Judah right after this. You guys ready? We go right back.
Oh.
And welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. It is still Friday, March 3rd. Carole Montgomery, Nida Khan, and Judah Friedlander continue with us. I want to touch something that Jon Stewart said, although I have to touch on the topic that got to it first for a second. It was a thing about the origins of COVID. And earlier in the week, the Department of Energy said, low confidence, we think it came from a lab in Wuhan, a leak, not intentional. Then the FBI director, Christopher Wray, goes on Fox News and says, yeah, we're pretty sure it came from a lab incident in Wuhan. And Jon Stewart in 2021 joked about that, but he was trying to make a point that he thought it came from a lab in Wuhan. And he said just this earlier this week when this other news came out, he shared that he didn't care that people criticize him, because I criticize people all the time. It's that people would email me or call him racist, anti-Asian racist, like you're trying to stir up hate of Asians, to things people saying things to him like, this is unforgivable. Like, I've been such a long fan. Go F yourself now. You've crossed the line. And he was getting at this knee-jerk reaction that even on the left we have, and maybe it's because we're so conditioned to fighting with the right like that, that it's an absolute litmus test. That's what he was getting at. And I agree with him. it's not on the origins of COVID, wherever it came from. None of us really know, but if you're not saying something maliciously and we understand it, that I think we live in a society that even on the left, that if someone's an absolute purist, people will attack them as viciously attack someone on the right. And I think it's stifling good faith discussions on issues. So, I mean, Carole, what do you think with Jon Stewart's point? Do you think it's, look, if someone's a bigot or racist, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying, you say what you do, whatever you want about them. I'm talking about these other issues where it's in good faith. You're saying, he's saying, look, I think it came from a lab in Wuhan, and he had no proof other than this. He talked about the name of the lab was like the COVID respiratory lab in Wuhan, stuff like that. And his point was like the vitriol directed at him was like off the charts. He couldn't believe how angry people on the left got at him for that.
Well, what's happened is that, first of all, I'm sure we've all noticed that. I mean, you walk in the streets, and I mean, first of all, when you're living in New York, you walk in the streets, everyone's angry, but there's like everyone's uber angry now, but about everything and everyone. The art of discussion is over. I would have, it was a while, you know, I think I remember when John did that, but nobody said to him, let's hear why you think that. The reason they jumped on him for that, of course, is because that was what Schmucko was saying. Right. Oh, you know, it was the Chinese virus, you know, so people just like, and it's like, nobody talks anymore. Nobody actually sits down and says, hey, what's your view on this? So when I was on a plane years ago, I was sitting next to a guy, and first of all, I hate talking to people, you know, and for some reason I started talking to this young man, and he was a Christian. I think he was going to some, you know, where the Christians hang out. And right. we got into abortion, and we, you know, and I'm of course very pro-choice. And we had this amazing discussion because he said, well, why do you feel this way? And I mean, we were on a long plane ride, and then he told me what his views were on why Jesus and God. And you know what? We didn't yell at each other. We both were like, oh, wow, that's a great point. And at the end, we didn't change each other's mind, but we had a great discussion. That's got to be, it's got to be over 20 years ago that I had a discussion with a kid. And that's what we're missing. It's nobody does that anymore.
And that young man is named Ron DeSantis, by the way. Governor of Florida. You didn't change his mind. Because I met a woman on a plane who wanted to kill babies, and I've been in politics ever since. That kind of thing. Judah, I mean, even as comedians, do you feel like there's a sense that if you go cross some line that the vitriol against us, even for a joke, could be? And I'm not talking about race or bigotry. I'm talking about like good faith discussions about stuff.
Yeah, you know, I mean, that's all part of like the cancel culture stuff, and it really is a mixed thing where, and I think so much of it, to me, just from my experience, goes back to school. One of the reasons I always hated school was it was just really a conformist institution. You know, I remember, you know, even in English class, we'd have to read a book, and then we'd have to read literary critics of how they dissected that book, and then we'd have to write a paper about what happened in the book and then what the different literary theorists said about the book. They never wanted your opinion on things, you know, and like history class, it was mostly just memorizing facts, not really discussing any nuance on things. And so I think there's tremendous pressure, and I think social media is a big part of it, with groupthink. You know, and again, like when it comes to like that cancel culture stuff, again, it gets discussed in two very different extremes without much nuance. You know, like, is cancel culture good or bad? You know, and there are good things about it, and there are bad things about it. I think, you know, when someone, like, I remember I was thinking of canceling. This is several years ago, canceling appearing at this festival. Music and comedy festival in Texas, because one of the founders of the festival posted something on Instagram making fun of a transgender person, and then, you know, so some bands were pulling out, and then some bands were like, all right, we're gonna go and we're gonna speak out against it, and we're gonna donate stuff to a local trans organization. I decided to go, and I visited the local a local teen trans organization. And I remember looking, they had all these things on their walls, you know, stuff kids and teens have drawn and stuff. And some, like, some didn't say LGBTQ, which was the main terminology at the time. It said something that was kind of dated and actually considered offensive now. I'm like, wait a second, why is this on the wall? And the person who was showing me around and running the center was saying, they kind of laughed and they said, the terminology changes a lot. And I was like, if someone said that today, they could actually get canceled. And they were like, yeah, I know. And it's ridiculous, because, so canceling someone who has no bad intent and then shaming that person forever, I think is not good, because you're not giving that person a chance to grow and learn. But on the same side, yes, there are people who are intentionally bad and will not stop with their stuff. And to equate those two different people as committing the same offensive thing, I think is dangerous. So I think, this group think, if you say something, hey, well, maybe it did escape from a lab, and then to call that racist is kind of weird, because at the time the main thought was, oh, at this Chinese wet market, they were eating bats. And then it's like, how is that not more racist than saying it escaped from a lab? I mean, you can make the argument that's a much more racist theory, but that's considered the non-racist theory, so.
I think, Judah, though, you touch on something, and it's sort of been my touchstone for every time I used to get called on like CNN. Did the comedians go too far? I'm like, look, there's no line, but what it looks like, I look at intention. We're adults. Right. If someone's being intentionally bigoted and racist, they deserve every backlash they get. Any consequence they get, they've earned it. But if they're being playful, or if they made a mistake, then you don't just silence them. Like you're saying, Judy, you want people to learn for the better, like Scott Adams, the Dilbert guy.
Because then you're telling people there's no room for growth. Yeah. There's no room for error. And, probably everyone has made some error. Sure. Has done something, and hopefully they've grown, and you have to leave room for that,
But also, for example, when we it's so fascinating to me, like when we go back in time, in time. First of all, like
time machine type of thing.
Yeah,
time machine.
Lisa Marie passed away.
Okay.
And everyone's talking about Elvis and her mom, and she was living with Elvis when she was 14, 16 years old. And nobody blinked an eye. It wasn't right. So, but when you go back and you see movies, and there's things that are in the movies, you're like, oh, that's not good. But that was, I'm not saying, and it was absolutely not right. But that was the time. And when what everyone's saying about, everyone learns how to grow, and they go, oh, I can't do that anymore. Or a lot of people in my age range don't understand pronouns. They're trying. They really are trying. But you have to understand, we didn't grow up. I'm not saying, if you want to be binary or they, I'm fine with that. I still have a tough time saying they when someone is a they. I'm all for anybody doing any gender.
But you're big on grammar, right?
Right. But also, but that's the problem, is that nobody's giving everyone, like, I want to learn everything. I want to know, because like what you were saying, Judah, about the LGBTQ, and now like there's a bunch of other letters. I'm like, okay, what do those stand for? So I understand what we're talking about. But we've reached a point where everything is black and white, and that is not life. Life is gray. Life is absolutely gray. There's middle none of that.
It's true. Yeah. Go ahead, Nitha.
Oh, I was going to say, I agree. You do have to have room, right, for people to grow. And especially, like you said, Dean, look at their intentions, where they're coming from. I think what happens also is that for so long, so many marginalized voices were canceled, right? Like they were not included in the conversation.
And they still are.
And still are. Absolutely, 1000%. How many times, Dean, we've talked about this, panels about Muslims without one Muslim at the table. Like, are you kidding me? In this day and age, there's no excuse for that, right? So those voices are not included in the discussion. They're a lot of times not included in media, in press. So this is why you have groups that are very vocal about having some sort of place and a voice in the discourse. And this is why you see a lot of passion and a lot of pushback. And it's funny to me that a lot of times people with the biggest platforms yell the loudest about being quote unquote canceled. I'm like, when were you ever silenced and canceled, right? Like somebody like Bill Maher. I'm like, show me one time where you were actually really ever canceled. Like, give me a break. So it's, it's a lot of stuff going on because I agree, Jon Stewart, I actually said that there needed to be room for that discussion back then, but we're never going to know. Even now, I mean, all these years later, we're never going to know how it started. But then you have bad faith, nefarious people who do put the racist and, the ignorant, bigoted stuff out there. And then that becomes the problem. So it's, I was talking about my injury earlier at the beginning of the show, and I've been trying to reconcile, this thing where I have my super in my building who is the nicest, most wonderful man. I would not have made it through this ordeal without him because I was on crutches for 5.5 months, and the man took out my garbage. He brings me packages, just the nicest guy all around, right? But he is I'm 1000% sure he's a total Trumper on the right. I mean, he'll just say the most crazy things left field. And I'm like, how do I even reconcile these two things? And I've tried to talk to him, but I've realized I'm like, you know what? He's never going to change because he's super old. And it's, but on a human level, we have connected, he looks out for me. I gave him a little Christmas bonus, just like the nicest person in the world. And that part of like connecting on a human level is unfortunately lost because you do have places like Fox News and elsewhere that have just divided us so much and put all this vitriol and disgustingness out there. And I just hope one day we can all come back together and not end up with what Marjorie Taylor Greene wants and have some sort of civil war again.
Well, look, I think it was a great conversation. I wish we had more time, but I agree that the idea on a lot on the right is cruelty. We should be about compassion and bringing people together, but not from a place of weakness where we got to punch back at the bigots. So guys, Carole, where can people find out more if they want to follow you on social media?
Carole Montgomery Comic on Instagram and National Mom on Twitter and Facebook, all over the place. Is it okay if I plug a show?
Sure, of course. Go ahead.
At the end of March 26th, we'll be doing a matinee at the Union County Performing Arts Center, 2 p.m. in Rahway, New Jersey.
Wow, so, 2 p.m.
You know what? We've been doing matinees. It's been the greatest time of my life. I am done. I am done by 4 o'clock. I am by the pool at 4:30. It's everybody should do matinees.
The older I get, the earlier the shows I want to be. I'm on the 5 o'clock show in New York all the time. I'm like, do you have a brunch show, by the way?
Yeah, exactly.
I like to do that. Just get it done with. Like going out all night to 1 in the morning. I'm like, nah, I don't really want to do a 10:45 spot. Sorry.
No.
Nida, what about you, my friend? Where can people find out more about you?
You can find me. I hate to plug Twitter because of who, but I'm still on there a little bit. So Nida Khan NY, it's NIDA KHAN NY, and hopefully now we'll return to writing and getting back in focus now that I have somewhat recovered and grandma's down to her cane, but I can be a little mobile. Let me tell you, I will never take mobility for granted again, ever.
I understand. And my friend Judah, the world champ, where can people find about your online shows and everything?
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm Judah World Champ on most of social media. That's JUDAH World Champ. JudahFriedlander.com. Also, Friedlander spelled like Friedlander. What else? Yeah, so no show this weekend probably, but next Saturday, March 11th, I'll be having a show.
Check it out online. Judah is hilarious. Carole is great. And Nitha's a great writer. I look forward to seeing more of your columns. Guys, thank you so much. That was a lightning fast, what just happened. We'll take a break. We'll be back with more of this show after this.